Okay, so we are, good morning. Today is the 15th day of Elul. We're right in the middle of the month of Elul, and the 1st of September. And we're up to the 6th reading of Parashat Tavo. And this is a very difficult and long reading. The reason it's difficult is because in order to make a covenant, Moses not only tells the people what good will come to them from keeping the covenant, but he also has to detail what will happen if they don't. And so he gives this in quite a long amount of detail. If you remember, at the end of Leviticus, the second to last parsha called Bechukotai, this was in chapter 26, we read about another set of details that are called curses, klalot. And those curses were also what would happen if the people would not keep the laws of the Torah. And we have to say that everything that is written in that chapter came to pass. And it's usually accepted by historians and by the sages and the rabbis that the first set of curses in Leviticus in chapter 26 describe the calamity that happened during the destruction of the first temple, whereas the longer version here in our parsha, in the 6th reading, is or describes what happened in the destruction of the second temple. Now the important thing to know is that the first set in Leviticus was said by God and transcribed by Moses. But here in Deuteronomy, like the rest of the book, this is something that Moses is first of all saying orally by himself, from himself. And then God tells him to commit it to writing, and that this will become the 5th book of the 5 books of Moses. And here Moses is overly detailed, so that the sages note that in Leviticus, when God gave the curses, there were 49 of them. But here in Deuteronomy, there are 98. Twice as many. Exactly twice as many. Altogether, if we want to do something positive about this, and we'll explain this in a moment in more detail. So 49 plus 98 is 147. 147 is the lifespan of Jacob, but Jacob is always described in Kabbalistic literature as Tov Ayin Hu Yevorach, Tov Ayin Hu Yivarech. Tov Ayin means a person with a good eye. A person who has a good eye, who looks at things favorably, can bless them, can bring blessing into the world. So whatever he looks at, whatever he surveys, he's blessing. So this is already a beginning of looking at the direction we're going to go in. The direction is that we'd like to see, especially now at the end of the year, when there's a famous Jewish idiom that says, Techel shana v'kilelotea, Techel shana v'birchotea. It should be the end of a year and its curses. It should be the beginning of a year and its blessings, which is what we say to each other as the year comes to an end. We only have 14 more days in this year, 5783, and in 14 days it'll be Rosh Hashanah, 5784. So we say the curses of this year should end and the blessings of the new year should begin. So it's very auspicious that we read this reading exactly 2 weeks before, and it's always about 2 weeks before the end of the year. And we have in our mind that these curses need to be turned into blessings. In fact, we begin, almost the beginning of all the prayers, especially on Yom Kippur, is a verse from Deuteronomy 23:6. And we read this, just the end of the verse, I'll read the whole verse. But your God, Havaya, refused to heed Balaam. Instead, Havaya churned the curse into a blessing for you. For your God loves you. And so, in between these two curses, in Leviticus and here in Deuteronomy, the 49 and 98 curses, we also had the supposed curses that Balaam wanted to curse the Jewish people with, the Israelites. What happened there? So if you remember, he set out to curse, and he ended up blessing. So there, the transformation happened with God doing it. Now, there's something very interesting. What about these 49 and 98 curses? The Zohar says something amazing. The Zohar says, at the end of the 49 curses in Leviticus, we find 4 verses that state the following. Again, this is the very end of the 49 curses. Then I will remember my covenant with Jacob. I will remember also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham, and I will remember the land, for the land shall be forsaken of them, making up for its Sabbath years by being desolate of them while they atone for their iniquity, for the abundant reason that they rejected my rules and spurned my laws. Yet, even then, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them or spurn them, so as to destroy them, annulling my covenant with them. For I, Havaya, am their God. I will remember in their favor the covenant with the ancients, whom I freed from the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations to be their God, Havaya. So what do we have here? That the 49 curses in Leviticus end with a sweetening. God already sweetened them. And he said, even though this is going to be very difficult, eventually I won't desolate you. I won't annihilate you. I'll bring you back. I'll remember the land. And you'll come back to the land of Israel. That's exactly what happened after 70 years in Babylon. They came back. And they built the second temple. But the 98 verses don't have anything at their end. There's no sweetening at the end. And so the Zohar tells us this incredible story. It says that the sages of the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who all of them probably didn't see the temple. They were already after the destruction. And they were also after the second destruction, which was caused by the rebellion of Bar Kochva and Rabbi Akiva. And they're looking at a desolate land. And they say, as we said, that the second set, the ones that we read in our Parsha, these 98 curses, they correspond to the second temple, the destruction of the second temple. And so they look at this and they say, so what in the world will sweeten this? There's nothing that can sweeten this. At that time, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was not with the sages. He was in hiding. If you remember, he was in hiding for 12 years and then another year. Altogether 13 years. So they cried and they said, who can sweeten these curses? Who can do what God did to Balaam when he turned the curse into a blessing? And then they remember that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he knows how to do this. And there's a famous story in the Talmud that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai sent his son Elazar to be blessed by 2 sages. And when he came back, he said to his father, what kind of a blessing did they give me? All they did was curse me. And his father smiled at him and said, what did they say exactly? And they told him the whole, and Rabbi Elazar told his father the whole curse, as it were. And Rabbi Shimon said, you don't understand what they said. And he took each part of the curse and he transformed it into a blessing. He said, this is actually a blessing. And he explained it to him. It's a very famous passage in the Talmud. So Rabbi Shimon, he knows how to take the verses of the Torah and turn them upside down. And what seems like a curse becomes a blessing. So again, the sages, they don't know where Rabbi Shimon is. He's in hiding. Nobody knows where he is. So Rabbi Yossi, who's one of his disciples, he writes the question on a piece of parchment, and he rolls it up, and the Zohar says that a dove came down, and he put the parchment, he tied it to its legs, and the dove brought the question to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he opens the question and he sees that the sages are asking, how do we sweeten the curses in this 6th reading of Tavo? in these 98 curses. And Rabbi Shimon in the beginning cries, he doesn't know. He says, this is too much for me even. And the Zohar says that then Elijah the prophet reveals himself to him. And as we explained many times, what that means is that he has a sudden insight, a sudden understanding. And then Elijah shows him verse by verse how you read each one of these verses as something positive. That's how you sweeten it. You need Elijah. Why Elijah? Where does Elijah come from? So let's just read one of these. It says like this. If on the other hand you do not obey God your God, neglecting to safeguard His commandments by studying the Torah's instructions regarding how to properly perform all His commandments and rules that I am commanding you to perform today, then all the following 98 curses will pursue you and overtake you. You will be cursed both in the city and in the field. Cursed will be your food basket and your kneading bowl. Cursed will be your children, the fruit of your womb, your crops, the fruit of your soil, your animals, the fruit of your livestock, the offspring of your cattle, and the choice of your flocks, and so on and on and on and on. And Elijah begins to explain to him, verse by verse, how these are transformed. Why Elijah? What's so special about Elijah? Why is he the symbol of this sudden understanding? It says that when he was alive, Elijah was a zealot. And he came and blamed the Jewish people for all the ills before God. And what did God say? He said to him, go out into an exile. Telling him that that was the wrong attitude. Even if they've done wrong, the right way is to say positive things about them. And so we learned from Elijah, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the master of this lesson, that the way to transform curses into blessing is through love. And that's why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says in the beginning of the Zohar that all the different generations, they were about balancing the left and the right. But says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Anan b'chavivut atal yamilta. We depend only on love. That love of the opposite of being a zealot, like Elijah. The opposite. The understanding that my role in life is to say good things about people, is to change my outlook on them. That is what transforms the curses into blessings also. Because it's all a question of outlook. It's all a question of how I understand these verses. So we don't even have time for one of them now. But the point is that each one of these verses can be read in such a way that instead of telling us of a curse, it actually describes a blessing in disguise. The reason for this is that the first set of curses, God already turned them into blessings by giving us a small sweet piece at the end. That was in Leviticus. By Balaam, God transforms the entire curse into a blessing. Balaam never gets a mean word out. But in our generation, the whole concept is that we're not exchanging one thing for another. We're not taking this world and saying, oh, we need a better world. We're not taking the people and saying, oh, we need to find a better people. And on the contrary, we're taking what there is and we're reinterpreting it. We're finding the good that is hidden within the evil. That is the message of these 98 curses. These 98 curses are here to teach us that the only way to sweeten in our generation, after the destruction of the second temple, is one generation, one long generation since then, is to be able to find the good within the reality that we see. And that's something that the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say. It's transforming the exile into redemption. The Hebrew word for exile is golah. The Hebrew word for redemption is geula. The only difference between these two words is that you add an aleph into exile, you get redemption. And that Aleph represents godliness. The moment that you can see godliness in other people, in reality, and always say only good things about other people and about reality, that is what sweetens these 98 curses and changes the reality that we live in, that reality, without giving it up, into something positive. So with this we'll end our formal part, and I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos, and I hope the next week will be more consistent. We'll start on Sunday, and hopefully get all six readings in, 6 or 7 even, and I wish everyone all the best.